Appreciate you guys having me on. This is a big honor. I want to take you guys back in time a little bit to set the table for why I created a game and um, talk about a little bit of my intertwinings with the industry. Are you guys familiar with Payoff Pitch, Joe Bryan?
Yes, we had Joe on a while back. Yep.
Um, Joe and I grew up a block away from each other in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And I don't know, I think I'm 5 or 6 years older than him. I used to babysit for him. And I think I was 13, he was 8, I was 14, he was 8. I introduced him to Stratomatic baseball way back in the day. And long story short, both of us became immersed in the tabletop world. Joe, much more than me. I went off and entered the military and did my thing. I played tabletop games in my teen years extensively. I replayed the 1979 Milwaukee Brewers, all 162 games. I still remember that as one of the most glorious times of my life, replaying and diving into statistics. Anyway, Joe went on to make his game. And long story short, last year, Joe asked if I wanted to reconnect. We've been friends over the years, reconnect and drive to the play convention. I'm like, what's a play convention? Right. I had no idea. I was completely disconnected from the industry. And I went there and I realized there were so many games out and so many like this world was thriving and there were so many games and I went home and I just started buying everything, literally buying everything and studying mechanics and it was so interesting to me, just the diversity in games and I literally bought everything. I think nearly got thrown out of the house from my wife because I kept getting more and more boxes and long story short, I just, I have my own business and I work about 70 hours a week. And in between all the little cracks, I started thinking about the mathematics of a game. And long story short, I went through about 7,000 iterations of the game before I decided on a mechanic system that I really liked. And I simply developed the game for myself. I wanted to develop something. If these guys could do it, I could do it. If Joe could do it, let me at least walk in his shadow and see if I could create something. And I will tell you, it took about 20 times more effort than I ever thought it would take, especially doing the cards. But I'm really, really happy to have released it and had some good feedback, so I'm happy for that. So if you guys don't mind, I could share a little bit of how the original Stratomatic impacted my life in a unique way, if that would be okay.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
So I mentioned that I got into Stratomatic, played the entire season in my teen years, and it developed an interest for me in mathematics and statistics. I spent literally, I think, an entire summer trying to figure out the probability of six-sided dice. I just wanted to crack the code. And I remember, I don't know if I was 14 or 15, spending all my time trying to figure out probabilities, like what is the probability of these dice. And once it connected, or once I figured it out, I started to really understand probability. Statistics had led me into programming. I think when I was 15, I was programming on Tandy in BASIC, creating simulation games that no one ever would see. But I had it. It would create entire Milwaukee Bucks season game by game or Brewers season game by game. And that programming and math actually led me to study astrophysics at New Mexico Tech, mathematics at New Mexico Tech. And I would say confidently, without Stratomatic or the mathematics or statistics of all of that world, I would not be where I am right now, and that's an understatement. The programming led me to web design. The web design led me to running my own websites. My own websites led me to a career in, the career I ended up in, and it all travels back to me from tabletop games 100%. I can't, it sounds like an overstatement, but without that math and statistics, I would not be here. So if you guys, I don't know how these normally go, so just please interject if you have any questions or I'm running on. But initially, when I started to create a game, I thought I was going to have all these little cards. I got all these little cards, normal outcomes and batter outcomes, and I developed this really elaborate card system, uh, different decks. I don't know if you can see here, weird or wild plays. Uh, I had fortune or fate, just different types of possible outcomes. An incredible amount of cards. These are the prototypes. And I developed a system with this hex card where I was actually going to use these to determine outs. It was a very minimal dice roll type of game. Long story short, I developed the prototype and realized it would probably cost $250 billion to sell it or manufacture it. So I'm like, maybe that's not the best route. I'm not Keith. I don't have the experience. I can't buy in bulk. But this is actually the prototype for high leverage baseball. And it really, really changed a lot. I remember posting this stuff online. I was super excited with what I had created. And then I realized there's no possible way I could bring that to market without it costing $300. So I kind of had to adapt. The current iteration, this is a game box, high leverage baseball. It is much different. And the core of the system, if you guys don't mind me, let me just try to figure out how to share my screen for a moment. All right, share screen. And let's see. Are you guys able to see that? It looks like
Yes.
you
Yeah.
should be able to see the 1921 Yankees.
Yep, you're good.
The biggest thing that I mean, I literally looked at every mechanic structure under the sun, and just being a math nerd, I was consumed with the different mechanics, how they had set up the structures and the dice rolls. And the biggest thing that bothered me was that in a 50-50 split, the outliers in baseball break that 50-50 split. And I wanted to create a system where you could use a 50-50 split and not have it break down, have it completely as accurate as I could make it with a 50-50 split. So that was the heart and soul of high leverage baseball. The outlier problem, anybody that knows tabletop baseball knows that is a huge issue. So one of the first step I did in I don't know if I can make this bigger. Hold on one second. Are you guys able to see Babe Ruth? It might be too small. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, we can see it, but yeah, I would say the numbers are a bit small.
Okay, let me see if I can make this bigger. Oh, sorry. Oh, here we go. Okay. Are you able to see Babe Ruth in the corner?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure that wasn't off the screen. So the first step in trying to fix the outlier, I decided to create an I column or a contact column. So this was my way of getting a confrontation, balls and strikes, the initial. It wasn't a three true outcome scenario because home runs aren't in there, but I wanted kind of a walk versus strikeout confrontation between the batter and the pitcher. So with a pitcher, we were using 3 10-sided dice to generate a number between 1 and 1,000. The pitcher would have 001 to 499, so they'd control the first 500, and the batter would control the second 500. And basically, it was structured so, you had kind of a 50-50 split between walks and strikeouts. And if it did not result in a walk or strikeout, and there's some other things on the card which I can explain, then it would push to the second column in a secondary role, and then the ball would be in play. And then the pitcher and the batter would have an equal opportunity to influence that. So it wasn't by any means a sabermetric type of game, but by putting in the tiers, it allowed me to file off a little bit of the rough edges of the outlier problem. The second way I approached the outlier problem was to put in negative modifiers. Can you guys see Home Run Baker in the middle? If you see Home Run Baker's card, on the K or strikeout, it says -4. On the triple, it says -2. So what that does is it tells us that Baker was an outlier. He did not strike out. He also did not hit triples. He hit compared to league average. So this is all generated compared to league average. So on the pitcher's card, let me just scroll to the pitcher's card so I can explain what this means. Let's say Waite Hoyt has a 37 to an 85 range for a strikeout. If he was facing Home Run Baker, because Baker is a -4, it would be 37 to 81. So it would take that outlier problem and just have a simple adjustment and fix it so there was no outlier issue any longer. Same with triples or same with anything. If a pitcher has an outlier number that is way above league average and doesn't work in the 50-50 split, they would have a negative number as well. So Waite Hoyt has a -3 home run. He does not give up many home runs. And if he was facing, let's see, let's go back to Babe Ruth, you would simply subtract 3. So it would be 878 to 000. So even though, we're looking at the last 1%, the outliers drove me crazy. Things like Suzuki and all of his singles, Bonds and all of his home runs. That stuff drove me absolutely crazy. And I spent a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure out how to work it into a system and not make it super complicated. So the basic game has 1 dice roll for the I, and then if it's not a strikeout or walk, then it pushes to the contact column. So basically about 1.5 dice rolls per play, if that makes sense. So that is the heart of the game and how I approached the outlier issue. And once I had that solved to a satisfactory degree, everything else really fell into play for me, or fell into focus for me. And statistically, I wanted this to be as accurate as I could have it. And I'm, there are a lot of other games that are very statistically accurate, but for a 50-50, the way it is structured, it is extremely accurate enough for me, as accurate as it can be as a baseline for a tabletop game. And I will say everything I put together around this structure, I wasn't looking at other games. I wasn't drawing from other games. Everything was pretty much, just trying to fill in the gaps. The next if you guys have any questions or anything, please stop me. The next thing I was trying to figure out was how to do 1.5 dice rolls, because I didn't want to add a third dice roll for an out. Payoff Pitch does a brilliant job of, generating outs organically from one dice roll. I'm pretty happy with having a dice roll and a half, but I was trying to figure out, how to statistically generate outs without another dice roll. And let me see if I can. Whoops. Let me see if I can pull up the out chart. Are you guys still able to see anything?
Yes.
Okay. I will. I'm going to cancel the screen just for a minute. So basically, when you roll on the ball and play, if it's not a hit, then because we have 3 10-sided dice, I would just take the last 2 numbers. And it was very, very simple. I just had a chart for the outs based on lefties or righties. I know this is hard to see, but you take the last 2 numbers and it just worked really, really well to generate what type of out it was. And so that kept it at a roll and a half. So I was really happy with how that played out. So basically, it's not an additional roll for the out chart. Goes pretty quickly and flows really well. The first iteration I had of the out chart had an error check and a range check possibility on every out. The chart was literally a monster, and it made the APBA chart look like a walk in the park. The game took 2.5 hours to play, and every game every roll had a possibility on an out for a range check or an error check by the fielder, and it had a play-by-play, and it was very immersive. But it was the first couple of times I played it, it was extremely, extremely obnoxious. So I said that is enough of that. So any questions about the core system? Just want to bring that back up.
Steve, not a question, but I like the fact that you try to settle whether it's a walk or a strikeout right from the get-go, and then you move forward from there, which not every game does.
Yeah, I mean, I really wasn't a sabermetrics guy. I mean, I mean, just including OPS and WAR on these cards were a big step for me. But I guess when I started to dive into statistics more, I started to pay a little bit more attention to WAR. And three true outcomes wasn't on my mind at all. I just wanted a walk and strikeout kind of a confrontation between the batter and pitcher. And if if that it didn't result in a walk, there was bad control. If it didn't result in a strikeout, then the ball would go into play. So that's kind of how I structured it. I guess I could talk a little bit. Are you guys still able to see Babe Ruth and Home Run Baker?
Yes.
So I was trying to figure out, one of the other things I was really interested in doing was trying to figure out how to give it advanced features without making it, a basic and advanced game. And I don't like to frame the features as an advanced game, because that makes you think of Stratomatic or APBA advanced. But I wanted to work in some other depth into the game. So when you see Home Run Baker, you see there is park factor, injury factor, error, rare play. If you didn't want to play with rare plays, you could just ignore that roll and just move forward. You know, you don't have to use rare plays. It wouldn't affect anything statistically. If you didn't want to play with injuries, you could ignore that roll, and you didn't have to use the injury system. The park roll, if you didn't want to use the park, you could just ignore that, and it wouldn't impact anything statistically. So by putting those on the first column, I structured everything so you could kind of build things a la carte. Do I want to play with injuries? Maybe not. Do I want to play with park effects? Maybe not. Do I want rare plays? Maybe not. But whatever you chose to do, it would not impact the game statistically. So I'm really happy with the way that came out. I probably want to show you guys a few of the things from the rule book. The rule book's pretty extensive, but it's not a complicated game. You just roll, and if it's not a strikeout or walk, you roll and again. But I want to take you guys through maybe I'll look at the rare play and the park effects. Are you able to see the table of contents here?
We can. I would say it's maybe if you can zoom in slightly on that, it's a little.
Sure. I'm new to Zoom, so I apologize. I want to make sure you guys could see everything. Okay, does that look better?
Yeah, that looks good.
So the book itself, I'm going to stop the share just for a minute. This is the rule book, and it looks pretty hefty, but it's actually, everything's pretty intuitive once you learn how the game flows. You really aren't checking this unless something elaborate comes up, like a range check on a fielder, which might occur once a game. A ballpark impact. In this game, you know, maybe 1 out of every 2.5, 1 out of every 3 games, you're going to have a potential for a hit to turn into an out or an out to turn into a hit. I didn't want to make it cumbersome. That was just a personal decision. So all these things are possible, but they're not going to bog down the game. When they happen, they feel special. They feel different. It's not happening every 10 at bats. The same with a range check. Error checks. I'll show you guys the error system. The rare play system, I'll go to that real quick. I really enjoyed doing the rare plays. And let's just go here. When a rare play occurs, and let me just scroll down to that. Excuse the fast scrolling. When a rare play occurs, it is going to be, it is 1 out of every 500 plate appearances, roughly. So they're not going to happen often. But when they do, they feel really special to me. Like when it occurs, it feels really special. And if I can get to it, excuse me, it's been a while. Okay. Here's the rare play chart. You roll 3 10-sided dice, and I'm not sure if you can see all this scrolling. There are a ton of different rare plays. It just goes on literally for about 20 pages. And it's not, I wanted to give it as much variety as I could. I wanted to make the most robust rare play system that I have seen. So you get a little bit of play-by-play, line drive to second, it's caught, steps on second to double the runner, triple. You can have anything from a chance to reverse a call. The ball hits the pole, controversial call. You get the option whether you want to try to reverse it or not. Just a ton of different options. 210 to 249, for example, foul or home run. A deep shot down the line clears the wall, but lands close to the foul pole. Challenge. The manager argues the ball actually curved fair and should be a home run. so you can decide whether you want to do a challenge. But again, these are very, very rare. You're not going to get, I think I played about 13 games before I had one. And then I had 3 games in a row where I had one. When they happen, they feel special and memorable to me. So
Steve, I like number 4. Line drive hits a bird in flight.
yeah, I wonder where I got that one from. I had to sneak a couple of those classic ones.
Yeah.
I had to sneak a couple of those classic ones in there, but the odds of them happening are so ridiculously low. It's, I guess you could say it's obscene, but you're never, you're really never gonna get, if you play an entire season, you're unlikely to get the same rare play twice. You just never know what's gonna happen. I think maybe I have 300 different types of outcomes. If I can scroll real quick to the bottom of the rare plays, there are some unique occurrences. I didn't want to make a lot of ratings adjustments, but you know how History Maker Baseball has some occurrences where you can have a couple of strikeouts back to back. I have a couple of those little things worked in as kind of an homage to History Maker, but they're very rare. 900 to 909 is double trouble. For the next 2 innings, there's a 50% chance that any double becomes a home run. Walk this way for the next 2 innings, there's a 50% chance that any strikeout becomes a walk. So there are some of those types of things worked in. But at 950 to 959 power surge for the next 3 innings, there's a 50% chance that any double turns into a home run. Even if you get this type of roll, it's very unlikely it's going to happen. But when it happens, it's likely going to happen in the bottom of the 9th against your team, right? So that's usually what happens with me. It usually happens at the most inopportune time. So let me go back to the card. So that's the rare, and you can see it's 1 out of every 500 plays. Basically 1 out of 8 ball games, or 20 rare plays per team per season if you played an entire season. The ballpark, if you don't mind me scrolling to the ballpark impact, not to give anybody motion sickness. So if you get a ballpark impact, let's say you're playing in Arizona, you finish the play as normal. Could be an out, could be a potential hit, and then you check the ballpark impact. Really simple structure. Let's say you're playing in Arizona, Chase Field, and the result was an out. You would then roll 2 10-sided dice to get a number between 1 and 100. And if it was a 1 to 16, that out would turn into a single, 17 to 29, a double, 30 to 32, a triple. And then there's no home run impact, no positive home run impact in Chase Field that would turn an out into a home run, just because of the statistics of that ballpark for that year. Now, if it was a hit and you had a ballpark impact, Chase Field, on 1 to 28, it would turn the hit into an out. So there's fewer home runs in Chase Field. So everything is kind of hit derivative for the ballpark impacts. So if you're in Chase Field and you get a hit, 1 to 28 would turn that hit, that home run, into an out. But on the other hand, there are more singles, doubles, and triples in Chase Field and fewer home runs. So that's kind of how it's structured. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. The ballpark impact occurs on 1 out of every 250 at-bats or plate appearances, which is roughly every 3rd game. So you would have a chance for a turnaround in every 3rd game of the of a season. Enough to, I didn't want to overbake things. I wanted them to feel special. I didn't want ballpark impacts, every 10th at bat. I wanted them just to play a role and feel more special rather than a burden in slowing the game down. Any questions on that aspect? See if I can find Coors Field, everybody's favorites. Cincinnati, which is another good example. If you have an out, there would be a 28% chance it would turn into a home run. And Coors Field, if you have an out, there's a 93% chance it's going to turn into a hit, single, double, triple, or home run based on the statistics for that year. The injury system, I guess I could show you guys the injury system next. And I hope I'm doing okay. This is the first time I've showcased my game outside of the conferences. So I'm sorry to scroll fast. Let's see, injury system. I have to check my own book. It's on page 22. So basically, with the injury system, you finish the play. Everything on this side, whether it's a rare play, an injury, a ballpark effect, you finish the play, and then the outcome of the play is going to determine what type of injury it was, what type of ballpark impact it was, what type of error it could be. So there's not an extra step. It does not disrupt the flow of the game. So let me go back to that. Players are rated. Where did we go here? So you have home run Baker. You have Roger Peckinpah. I'm not sure if you can see iron to the right of his 2021 season or above his season stats. He's an iron. Home run Baker's semi-starter. Babe Ruth is iron. So there's different types of ratings based on how much they played that year. So with the outcome, you have iron, depending on how often they played. The injury ratings, you have an iron rating, a low likelihood of injury, a mild likelihood of injury, and a moderate likelihood of injury. And depending on the type of play, and this is the main chart, infield single, you would roll a 10 or 6-sided dice to see who the injury check was on. So the injury check is very much tied to the outcome of the play. If it was a home run, obviously, the left fielder isn't going to get injured. So a 1 could be on the hitter, a 2 to 4 on the pitcher, 5 to 6, no possible injury. A hit by pitch, 1 to 5 hitter, low likelihood of the pitcher getting injured on a hit by pitch, so on and so forth. So on an out, 1 to 2 hitter, 3 pitcher, 4 catcher, 5 primary fielder. So an injury check works like that. If you get one, you would refer to this chart, roll the dice, and then based on whether that player was iron, low chance of injury, mild chance of injury, or moderate, you could get a major injury, a minor injury, or no injury. And if you look on these cards, 1 out of every 250 plays, or basically every 3 games, will yield a potential injury check. So the likelihood of an injury is rare. The first time I did a live video on YouTube to showcase my game, I had an iron player get injured for 50 games, and I was just about ready to quit. I felt so embarrassed. I calculated the statistical likelihood of that occurring, and it was 1 in 10,000, but it had to occur during the first game I showcased on YouTube, of course. But it's extremely rare that an iron player is going to get injured, but it can happen to that degree. And again, injuries are completely, completely optional if you don't want to play with them. So this is the pitcher injury results. You have the minor card. Can you guys see that okay? You have the minor card, which tells you the time missed, which is random, knee discomfort, blister, forearm tightness. And then we have the major injuries for pitchers: rotator cuff tear, 50 to 100 games, labrum tear, Tommy John surgery, fractured finger, shoulder separation. So each player or each outcome, whether it's a fielder, a catcher, whatever, has a specific major and minor injury. And I don't know, I've played probably 80 games so far. And, I don't know if you guys play out of the park, but sometimes when I used to be an out of the park junkie, and it's always seemed like I was getting way too many injuries just because, that's the nature of baseball, right? But this isn't quite at that level. You're going to get some injuries, but it's toned down a little bit. It's not, I wouldn't call it realistic, right? I would call it, when they occur, you could have maybe 8 minor injuries, 9 minor injuries over the course of a season, maybe 1 to 2 more major injuries, depending on, the type of player you're dealing with, but a little toned down from regular baseball and out of the park. And that was a command decision, just again, because I built the game for myself, and I really, really didn't want to have to deal with 8 million injuries during the season. So that is the injury system. I walked through the park system. Any questions on anything I showed you guys so far? I know it's probably a lot of information overload.
There's a couple questions in the chat, Steve.
Sure.
William's wondering, how does the ballpark factor take into consideration stadiums like Fenway that have multiple quirky dimensions, Green Monster, Pesky's Pole, and Deep Center?
It doesn't specifically. So, there isn't necessarily a left and right adjustment in the first iteration. And, some people might consider that a fault. I might consider that a fault. Initially, when I built it, it had, basic ballpark impact. And moving forward, it's been 6 months since the game has been out. There's a good chance I'm going to adjust that, and it's a simple adjustment that won't ruin the game mechanics. You can even, if you want, home bake or home brew and adjust the home run for lefty righties while keeping the singles or doubles. Obviously the doubles would be impacted in Fenway, but honestly, I was in such a rush to get the game out, and I didn't think anybody was going to buy it, that it's generically structured off the ballpark, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, William.
Yeah. And my other question was, is there any way to take into consideration umpires? I know we don't have statistics from the bygone era, but perhaps characterization might help to model what it might be like for a pitcher with an umpire behind home plate.
Yeah, William wants an Angel Hernandez card.
Yeah, actually, the more I look at History Maker Baseball, the more I'm looking at introducing things like that. It is not in the first iteration of the game, and just being completely honest, the cards, I handmade every card, and it took me 10 times longer than I expected. No excuses. Again, I didn't think anybody would buy the game, so everything was, like the ballpark impact and stuff like that, pretty straightforward. But I don't want to scare anybody by saying, I'm looking at introducing that, because I don't want anybody to feel like the game would change. It wouldn't change if I introduced that. I would probably just add a section on the rare play or an optional second edition on the rare play, where you can have an umpire impact. And it would be really easy to introduce that on the cards as well. On the cards, you could just add a random roll. So it's in the back. There's a few things that are in the back of my mind now that I've played that I would really like to introduce, and that's one of them. Again, I don't want it to happen frequently, but if you could have it, I don't know, every third, every seventh game where there's some kind of an umpire impact. The rare play has controversial calls to begin with, so it wouldn't be a stretch to introduce it. And the original iteration of the game had streaks and weird or different things that could occur. I do want to put that in as optional, for guys that like a little bit more dynamic, and I think that would be pretty easy to do. I have a big grand idea, and I'm not going to get into it until the end about how I'm going to approach what I'm thinking about doing for past seasons. And I'm thinking about doing it, but I want to show you guys that in just a little bit. There are ejections in the game in the rare plays. Everything can happen that happens in regular baseball. In a rare play, there's ejections. I don't think I went as far as having Morgana run onto the field, but there's pretty much everything you could imagine in between. I think I had to keep Morgana off it just so we didn't get the R rating.
Nice. How about weather? Is there like rainouts, or I guess in the case of Dome, is there like a power outage type of rare play?
Some minor stuff, like if it's in a dome, there could be an impact. I've been, since putting out the game, I've been looking at some of the other features that some of the other games have, and adding weather impact as an optional feature, based on, the season, the month and that sort of thing is something I might introduce for the second season. But again, it wouldn't be hard for me to introduce that. I don't want anybody to think it would break the game mechanics. It would keep the same game mechanics. It would just add to it another layer, if that makes sense. So I think, let me just see everything. I want to pull up the rule book again if I can. And let me just share the screen. I think I have it. So everything that can happen in regular baseball can happen in the game. Let me just walk through, there's a section for how to handle hit and run and suicide squeeze and whatever you want. It's rather easy. It's not complicated. And there's a section in the rule book. Are you guys able to see, on the batter's card, you have bunt rating, steal ratings, run rating, and double play. When a double play opportunity occurs, basically it is a 1 to 50 starting roll, and you look at the pitcher's adjustment and the batter's adjustment. This is a really bad example because we don't have double play statistics from 1921. So let me see if I can pull up a different team. Let's see. Da-da-da. Okay, so let's see here. Jose Herrera. His double play is -25. If you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of his card. If you get a double play opportunity, you take in the pitcher's adjustment, which could be a plus or minus 25, the batter's adjustment, which could be plus or minus 25, and you base that off of a 50 starting point. You don't go lower than 25, you don't go higher than 75, but you do have batter and pitcher adjustments based on statistics. Running is 1 to 100. They have a running rating. So Jose's running is 38. Gabriel Moreno is a 51. If you want to do an advancement, you factor in the fielder's arm, and you have a number between 1 to 100. So Tucker Barnhart has a 70 run. So if you want to send him home, he would have 70 plus the fielder's adjustment. There are some adjustments, situational, obviously with 2 outs, and the type of play, but that's kind of the base. And every batter has a bunting rating and a stealing rating and so on and so forth. For the pitchers, the off-colored information at the bottom right-hand corner, you have fatigue, you have hold, wild pitch and balk likelihood, and double play likelihood. Anytime you get a potential for a wild pitch or a balk, it starts at 50% and adjusts. So Justin Martinez is a plus 25 wild pitch, plus 25 balk. If you had a wild pitch opportunity, he would be 1 to 75. So it would start at 50 and it would adjust up to 75. Hold ratings, obviously. Fatigue. I really like the way the fatigue system has worked out in this game. Very, very picky about it, and I was very nervous about it. But basically, everyone gets a fatigue number. You can see Jordan Montgomery is a 19. And I have, Bob Gibson, he comes with the game. His fatigue, I believe, is 21. It really is dependent on how many walks and strikeouts and earned runs they give up. So you could have 2 pitchers with a 21 fatigue, but somebody with a big ERA like Jordan Martinez with a 6.23 ERA, he's going to give up so many hits and walks and earned runs that he's going to burn through that fatigue much more quickly than Bob Gibson. So the way the fatigue system works is whenever they enter the inning, they lose 1 point. So Jordan Montgomery is a 19 fatigue. He would enter an inning and go to an 18. If he gives up a walk, walk, hit, or hit by pitch, his fatigue drops 1. If he gives up an earned run, his fatigue drops by 1. So bad innings or giving up a lot of base runners are basically going to chew through the pitch count, and it's going to drop rapidly. And so there's no real adjustment you need for ERA. It's going to be very dependent on the pitcher for that season. So there's no radical adjustment you need to do for Bob Gibson compared to a Jordan Montgomery. They will last how long they lasted. Once you get to 0, you can continue to keep them in, but there will be a potential penalty that works very much like the ballpark impact, where 10% of outs could turn into hits. So very, very simple. So that is how the fatigue system is set up. Any questions on that? I'm just checking the chat. Let me go to the chat here. Did you research this is from Craig. Did you research all the players to come up with all these ratings, or did you come up with a formula based on stats to calculate speed? I will tell you, I was not a spreadsheet guy. So I learned spreadsheets along the way, and from baby steps to where I am right now, I'm churning out some pretty elaborate spreadsheets and ratings generations, but every formula I came up with wasn't a simple look at one stat, give it a rating. For example, batter fielding ratings, like range ratings, they take into consideration multiple factors to create range ratings. running ratings take into consideration multiple factors, and you don't want to give away the secret sauce, but everything is really looking at a couple different factors and creating a custom formula, if that makes sense. So everything on here from fielder range to batter running is completely a custom formula, and something I really, really spent a lot of time thinking through just to make sure I was happy with how they turned out. I haven't talked about fielding. And let me just go up here a little bit. Tired of looking at Arizona. Let me just pull up something a little bit more exciting. And where are we at here? No offense to Arizona fans. So with the fielding, the way I wanted to approach things is I wanted an A or B. Fielding, if you look at Aaron Judge, he is center field A minus. I don't know if you guys can see at the bottom of the card if that is too small. Let's look at Juan Soto. Juan for right field at the bottom of his card is an A with an exclamation point. So there are adjustments for range and arm. So Juan Soto, a plus or an exclamation point would be a good arm, and a minus would be a negative range. I wanted the A's, fielders are rated A, B, and C. Why? I don't know. It just made sense. I didn't want to overbake the fielding. But an A is very rare. A B is the next step down, and a C is the lowest rated fielder. The way I structured things was I only gave out a certain number of A's per league and a certain number of B's per league. You had to have played a certain number of games at that position to qualify to be an A fielder or a B fielder. So what I wanted to weed out was statistical randomness. If Stanton came in and played right field for one game and didn't commit an error, I didn't want him to be an A fielder because that's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. And if you want perfect statistical realism for that season, it's debatable making him an A fielder, and then you could play him the entire season, break the game, and I didn't feel that was realistic. So that was my interpretation of realistic outcome. So a player had to play at least 50 games at a position to qualify for an A rating, and I believe at least 60 games to qualify for a B rating. There are only a certain amount of A's and B's that I handed out. And the way I structured things was to hand out a certain number of A's and B's so that the range ratings and the air ratings and everything would come up with league average, if that makes sense. So everything is completely weighted. It looks like a very simple fielding system, but there's a lot of paranoia on my part to make sure, more than anything, I wanted to make sure the fielding was completely accurate. The air ratings per year were completely accurate. A, B, and C is for the air ratings. And then you have range, which is minus, neutral, or plus. And then you have arm. Arm is a exclamation or a double exclamation. So there are some players with a double exclamation. And let's see here. Catchers have a different type of system. When you have I'm not sure if you can see Jose Trevino. At the bottom of his card, it says catcher ? A question mark is a poor arm for a fielding outcome, not for throwing out runners. So let me see if I can show you an example here. 1 second. There are special catcher ratings. Okay, if you can see Carlos Narvaez, he has a pound symbol in front of his catcher rating. That means he is good at throwing out runners, or he is bad at throwing out runners, excuse me. There is also another symbol, which is a double pointed arrow to the right, which means he is good at throwing out runners. So I didn't overbake the impact, but catchers do have a unique set of ratings. And everything's baked in range, arm. I wouldn't call it simplistic. I would call it statistically realistic without overbaking it, if that makes sense. So any questions about that aspect of fielding? I want to see if I can show you guys the error chart. So one of the unique things about the error chart, let me make that bigger, is this is one of the things I changed early on in the game. There are A, B, and C fielders, and you can have an error outcome based on, unlike games like Stratomatic, you can have an error on a hit, or you can have an error on an out. So if you look at the top of this chart, it says ground ball errors. And the second section of the error chart is all other errors, pop out, fly out, etc. So any play when you any play that has an error rating, let's say you're looking at Juan Soto, 970 to 999 is a possible error rating. You continue with the flow of the game, so it doesn't stop. You go onto the ball and play, you finish the play, it's a single, it's an out, whatever, and then you add the error check on top of that, so it doesn't disrupt the flow. So if Juan Soto, you rolled a 980, that would be an error check. You'd finish the play, ball and play, single, double, triple, home run, or out. Obviously, on a home run, there's no error. And then you would go over to the error chart to see if there is an error on that specific play, pop out, line out, ground ball, single, double, whatever. Ground ball errors have a different rate, obviously, because there's more errors on a ground ball play. A, B, and C. An A makes fewer errors, a B makes a few more errors, and a C a few more errors. So basically, statistically, in the modern era, a C fielder will make an error in about 50% of the plays, and an A about 32%. So I put in one thing you can do, one thing I will do with each season is generate a unique number for A, B, and C, because there's different error rates for each season. But if you want to just play with the simplified version, you have the modern era, the pre-2000 era, and the historical era. So in pre-2000, you're playing like a 1989 season, there's a lot more errors. So if you had an A fielder back then, he's still going to be superior, but he's going to make more errors than an A fielder would in the modern era. And in the historical era, Babe Ruth's era, there's a lot more errors. So there's still an advantage to being an A, B, or C. But it's just going to be more dramatic depending on the era you're playing in. And other error checks, like on a single, a double, a line out. In the modern era, you can see in if your fielder is an A and there's a possible error on a line out, it would only be 1 to 8. So very, very unlikely. Same with a pop out, he drops a pop out. Stuff like that can occur, but on a single, very rare. That it occurs. It's not going to occur a lot, but I wanted to bake in the possibility that it could occur. So the error chart has some differentiators based on whether it is a out or single. And there, really quickly, I don't want to go on forever, but there's also a range check. So when you do roll an error check, 30% of the time, those will be a range check. So you can look at a fielder's range rating, and a single could turn into an out, or an out could turn into a single. And it's already been an hour and 7 minutes. I don't want to, drag you guys on forever, but there are range checks baked into the error checks. So that is basically the game. And I'm sorry to ramble on forever. I didn't realize I had gone on forever. I appreciate you guys' patience with everything. Anything I didn't cover, anything you're curious about or would like to see?
I was curious about the injury. It looks like very detailed information as far as the minor and the major injuries and the types of injuries. Did you look into like any actual injured list data and the frequency that somebody's out with a hamstring versus an oblique, or a different shoulder versus elbow injuries for pitchers, or things like that?
Yeah, I'm very much an AI research guy, so I used it a lot in the background to look at different error frequencies or injury frequencies. One of the deficiencies is that, it's going to be a little bit different in different eras. So moving forward, I would like to create, optionally or free, maybe different injury charts for different seasons or different eras, based on Tommy John surgery frequency or whatnot. But I put together more of a broad stroke based on possibilities, rather than specific seasons, if that makes sense. So I did use the help of AI to put together something reasonable. And I like real baseball. When I was doing some of my first games, you're super paranoid that your mathematics stink, right? Even though they're sound, and you've run them through 1,000 times. But I remember just a funny story. I was playing the Dodgers in Toronto from 2024. And this only happens when I do a video to throw up on YouTube. That's the only time I get something crazy. I think I had the Dodgers hit home runs in 4 straight innings. And then I had Toronto get a hit by pitch in 3 straight innings. And I said, there's no way anybody's going to believe this is statistically accurate. But that was it's just one of those weird baseball things when you're playing a game, the most unlikely thing you could ever imagine occurring usually happens during a live stream.
With the injuries, do you use injuries to reduce the effectiveness of a player that might have a low amount of plate appearances, for example?
Good question. And I have a system, and it's let me just pull that up again. I won't take up a lot of your guys' time. I just want to there we go. I have a system. Let me just find there are some things I didn't go over, but batter fatigue and pitcher fatigue over the course of a season is baked in. So you can make this advanced or as detailed, as out of the parky as you want. Each player on their card has an injury rating. And these are old cards, so ignore this. This is not accurate. Let me find it. This was the first iteration of the cards. Let me find something a little bit better. Okay, so players have the injury rating is also and the fatigue rating is also based on this rating up here: iron or starter or semi-starter. So an iron player played 150 or more games during the season. A starter 130 to 139, a semi-starter 100 to 129. Then we have platoon players and bench players and rare players and minors, guys that only played 9. So everybody gets a fatigue rating on their card, and maximum playing days in a row. Iron has no limit. A starter maximum 25 days in a row before you need to bench him. Semi-starter, you can play 20 games in a row. Platoon 15, bench 10, etc. There are fatigue adjustments, so you can continue to play these guys, but unlike games, some of the classic games where you have these statistical outliers where they hit 374 and 74 at bats, you can't play them an entire season. They're going to normalize. So if you had a guy like that played 60 seasons, after 10 games in a row, he would start to take a hit of about 5%. And after a certain other break point, it would go to 10%. And then he would have running modifiers and stealing modifiers and increases of errors. So there's really an advanced layer to this. This is completely optional. But again, it's kind of a la carte. You can work that in and get as deep into the weeds as you want. A minor player that plays too many games will incur a 15% modifier penalty if you play it too much. A rare player, 10%. A bench player, 8%. A platoon, 5%. And a semi-starter, if you play too much, will only be a 3% penalty. So the more you play, the less likely you're going to be penalized if you push past the fatigue barrier. Pitcher fatigue. Iron is somebody that starts more than 35, starter more than 20 starts, spot starter 10 to 19. And there are also fatigue modifiers for that as well. There's probably about a dozen other things I have in the game that I didn't share. But basically, like I said, you can a la carte everything and work in as much complexity in your season, from injuries to fatigue, that you want, or you just can completely ignore it and just roll the dice. So it's there's no requirements to use a fatigue system. You can just go full Stratomatic and have somebody with 74 at bats play the entire season if that's the way you want to play it.
I was going to mention, I appreciate the, you mentioned earlier about the outliers. I was looking up Joe Sewell, played for the, I think for the Indians back in the 20s and 30s, and he struck out between three times and basically less than 10 strikeouts a season for his last 9 seasons. So if you don't have some type of way to modify for him, he's an extreme outlier as far as not striking out hardly ever, right?
So, guys like Tony Gwynn, or Suzuki.
Mm-hmm.
You want to play a game and have Tony Gwynn not get 50 strikeouts just because you don't have that factored in. I don't. And, you can't make any system perfect, but this will be, Tony Gwynn might have a 2 or 3 strikeout variants off where he was, for example. I am working in, I do want to say, just in conclusion, I am working in some fictional stuff. And with the fictional stuff, I built in the ability to play an entire season. So with fictional, I didn't want to, have 1 season, 2 season, 3 season, 4 season. So there is an inclusion in the chart for fictional players, and I want to see if I could actually find that. There's a inclusion in the fictional contact column where there's a range of 30 that is going to have a modifier for if the player is in his rookie season, is a prospect, is a just a regular season, in one of their superstar seasons, or as an aging veteran. So one of the things I developed for the fictional side of things was that you could have one card and play an entire player's career, and it could be completely random. They might have 5 superstar seasons. You don't know. They might get injured and they might be downgraded to aging veteran earlier than you would expect. The fictional, I developed that. And one of the things I'm thinking about doing differently for season replays, and some people will like this and some people won't, is getting one card for every player, like Bob Gibson. And based on the number of superstar seasons or rookie seasons or aging veteran seasons, you could just have that one card and the modifiers would be there. So you could play, you wouldn't have to buy 100 seasons of cards. You could buy one for every player. There would be some information, and based on that, you'd have a really simple chart roll to modify based on what season he was playing in. So that's one of the things I'm looking at doing in the very near future. I'm sure that'll anger a few people because it's not every season, but I plan on releasing older seasons as well, but this is just one of the things I'd like to do.
Craig was wondering if you researched all the players to come up with the ratings, or did you come up with a formula-based stats to calculate speed, fatigue, etc.?
Yeah, I researched. I didn't research all the players, but I did. Some of the ratings are based off a look at their career to date, rather than just an aberrant season. So if you had somebody that is normally a really good runner, but played a limited, number of games, they would have a tendency to be a better runner than just the pure statistics. I didn't overweight it. I wanted to be realistic for that season, but there are some factors in there that, normalize things to a degree. I didn't want to overbake that.
Steve, it sounds like you struck a nice balance between playability and accuracy. I like the fact that you didn't overplay defense. I think some games go down the defense rabbit hole, and there are way too many error checks and range checks, and it seems like you have like a nice happy medium there.
I've looked at so many games, and I really respect the detail that's put in, but I wanted to make a game that was highly replayable and not getting bogged down in checks, but still having everything there. The error checks occur on 1 out of every 16 2/3 plays. So you're going to get a certain number of error checks, like 2.2 per game. And 30% of those are going to be range checks. So basically roughly like 1.7 error checks per game. And based on that, you're going to get the number of errors per game. So it's in there, and it's just not crazy. Thank you, William. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not overwhelming, which is, I think, the way you want it, or at least the way I want it.
Yeah, I wanted to. Like I said, I wanted to build a game for myself, and I didn't want everything happening all the time. When it happened, errors are going to happen when errors happen. But you could build a system where you have 10 error checks per team per game, and then a certain percentage, with the same error outcome. I didn't want it to be that, overburdened with
Yeah.
ballpark checks and range checks and
And even when you look at a real, just a real live MLB game, typically you might have a couple of errors in that game, and you might have one or two great plays, and you might have plenty of games that you have no great plays. Just everything's just standard. So I think that's realistic.
One of the interesting things was trying to process how to handle range, defensive runs saved and range, because you can really go down a rabbit hole when it comes to things statistically, uh, players, and like a pitcher's performance is obviously going to be based, the defensive runs saved are based into the statistical outcome of the pitcher. It's already baked in. So what degree do you want to take that? Then you have to make statistical adjustments to the pitcher, and then you're getting into potential theory. So there was a lot of thinking behind that, and to what degree did I want to do range checks. I didn't want to overbake them, but I did want to make them a possibility.
Yeah. If you go too far down that road, then you basically distort the pitching stats, because if you have too many great plays, then you're distorting the pitching stats, because theoretically you would have already baked in the right amounts of hits for those pitchers and walks.
I am someone that, and you could call this philosophical, but I am someone that believes if you start to initially, I'm not going to lie, I was going to do day night splits for my cards. If you see this on my original page, I was going to do day night, left, right, and what else? I was going to do day night. I was going to do weather splits. I was going to left, right. I had like 4 different things, but I quickly realized in my over eagerness that it was creating outlier statistics on everything. So that is kind of the philosophical thing. It would be really cool to have day night splits for Aaron Judge, and home and away splits. And then you have a day split where he's at home versus lefties versus the month. And all of a sudden he's hitting 700 on day games at home in April. And it's just became ridiculous. So I just set that all aside. I could see potentially having slight modifiers that wouldn't destroy the game, but I think the only regret I have is that I did not work in lefty righties, but I have a method that I'm going to be using to work that into the same system moving forward. That won't break the game or change the game.
Yeah, that would be the one thing that I could foresee some people asking for.
I want to think it through because there are outliers. I mean, when you look at lefty and righty, you get into a world of philosophical debate where you can have too many outliers or too many radical differences, and potential to be abused or overused. Or I love lefty righty splits. I don't have anything against them. I just want to do them right and not overbake them. I mean, if somebody hits 370 versus a lefty this year, but their career batting average versus lefties is 293. I want to process how to do that properly, and I just want to, when I introduce it, I want to do it properly. So I thank you guys for taking the time to listen. I really did not expect to be here when I put out the game. But I just absolutely love the community. I love everything that everybody puts out. I have an enjoyment for Ian Brooks' game. I have an enjoyment for History Maker Baseball, and I have an enjoyment for all the really complex games out there. I really appreciate all the time and energy this community has put into everything, really.
So any final questions here?
Where can you buy the game, and what seasons are currently available?
I have, when you purchase the game box, you get 4 classic teams, 2001 Seattle. You get the classic Cardinals, the 75 Reds, and the 1921 Yankees. People ask me why not the 27 Yankees. I don't know. But I just want an early root season. But you can get it at tabletoplegends.store. And right now it has a 2024. I'm working on the 1982 season as we speak. I'm working on a fictional league, and I will be eagerly awaiting my Brewers World Series victory so I can roll out the 2025 series soon. Season.
My other
Well,
question, which
Steve-
I think I've asked on a few other occasions, is how long does it take you to generate a single season's worth of player cards?
Oh, close, almost to the point where I almost had my wife file for divorce. I did everything manually this year. Every statistic is manually entered, every rating is manually entered. So it literally took me probably 200 hours for a season at minimum. I have a spreadsheet set up, so I'm going to try to have it generate 80% of things automatically this year. So hopefully not divorce worthy time investment.
Well, we'll see about the Brewers winning. We'll get an idea of this later this week when they come into Toronto.
Yeah, I'm just anxious for that. I'm I'm an old school guy. I still remember when we were in the same division with you guys, and I still have a great fondness for that era.
Yeah, I liked it better when they were in the American League. You can have Houston back.
Well, I wish Houston would go back to the National League. One of my favorite players, J.R. Richard. I'm still super attached to him from back in the day. I can't mentally process Houston being an American League team.
Well, they're going to get rid of all that anyway, according to the commissioner. Okay, any final questions? Anybody have anything for Steve?
Sounds like a great game, Steve. Good luck with it.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys taking the time to look at it.
Craig wants to know if your wife plays.
No, no, not at all. My wife is Australian, so just a real quick note on the pitch clock. I took her to a Cincinnati. I live in the Cincinnati area. I took her to a Cincinnati Reds game. By the 3rd inning, this was like 7 years ago. She's like, "It's a game done." The game went 4 hours and 19 minutes, and she's like, "I'm never going back to a baseball game ever again." So thank God for the pitch clock. No, she wouldn't touch it. She hates baseball.
Okay. Well, just a reminder about September 16th. We'd like a lot of people to come out. And is it October 20th, Derek?
October 21st, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, if you come on the 20th, we won't be here. But if you come on the
Right.
21st, we will.
Sounds good. Steve, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you
I
so much.
just want to echo excellent presentation, and the game looks great.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
All right, guys. I think we're going to wrap it here. So everybody have a great evening.
Take care, everybody.
See you at the next one.
All right, bye now.
All right, take care.